This video explains who is really behind the migrant crisis on the Belarus-Poland border and who the real hero is of the story. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. Thousands of adults and families with children were recently amassed at the Belarus-Poland border, clamoring to be let into the European Union. The migrants are mainly from Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. The migrants have been drawn back from the border, and Belarus is dealing with them, and the crisis seems to have been diffused for the time being. How the migrant crisis developed is quite well known. Belarus gave visas to its various embassies to would-be in its various embassies to would-be migrants as visitors to Belarus, with the promise that they would be allowed to go to the Belarus-Polish border, where they can enter Poland or demand to be let in as asylum seekers. Once allowed in, then they can go anywhere in the European Union that they want. Ostensibly, Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko wants to punish the European Union for imposing sanctions on Belarus. The reason sanctions were imposed were that Belarus hijacked a Ryanair flight from Greece to Lithuania on May 23, 2021 to apprehend 26-year-old Belarusian dissident journalist Roman Protasevich. A Belarus fighter jet was scrambled to force the Ryanair plane to land in Minsk, where Protasevich was arrested. The move by Belarus was condemned by European leaders and called a hijacking by some of them. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said via Twitter that the outrageous and illegal behavior of the regime in Belarus will have consequences, adding those responsible must be sanctioned. Roman Protasevich is still jailed and his 23-year-old girlfriend Sofia Spega, a Russian citizen, is under house arrest. According to the Council of the EU's website, the Council imposed restrictive measures against the Belarusian regime to respond to the escalation of serious human rights violations in Belarus and the violent repression of civil society, democratic opposition, and journalists, as well as to the forced landing of a Ryanair flight in Minsk on 23 May 2021 and the related detention of journalist Roman Protasevich and Sofia Spega. The EU Council website describes the kind of sanctions imposed. The new targeted economic sanctions include the prohibition to directly or indirectly sell, supply, transfer, or export to anyone in Belarus equipment, technology, or software intended primarily for use in the monitoring or interception of the Internet and of telephone communications, and dual use goods and technologies for military use and to specified persons, entities, or bodies in Belarus. Trade in petroleum products, potassium chloride or potash, and goods used for the production or manufacturing of tobacco products is restricted. Furthermore, access to EU capital markets is restricted, and providing insurance and reinsurance to the Belarusian government and Belarusian public bodies and agencies is prohibited. Lastly, the European Investment Bank will stop any disbursement or payment under any existing agreements in relation to projects in the public sector and any existing technical assistance service contracts. Member states will also be required to take actions to limit their involvement in Belarus of multilateral development banks of which they are members. Since October 2020, the EU has progressively imposed restrictive measures against Belarus. The measures have been adopted in response to the fraudulent nature of the August 2020 presidential elections in the country and the intimidation and violent repression of peaceful protesters, opposition members, and journalists. On the face of it, the EU would be fully justified in imposing further crippling sanctions on Belarus for forcing an European Union member's passenger airliner to divert it from its destination and then arresting two passengers. But there is much more to the crisis than meets the eye. Granted that Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko has ruled the country since 1994, his re-election in August 2020 was condemned as massively rigged by the opposition and led to nationwide demonstrations which were put down by the police with the detention of thousands and dozens being sentenced to jail terms. But by imposing sanctions in October 2020, the EU was interfering in Belarusian affairs. With its sanctions, the EU is seriously hurting the Belarus economy. The EU should have expected retaliation from President Lukashenko. He played the cards he has to hurt EU as much as he can by orchestrating the migrant crisis, as they have played their cards to hurt Belarus as much as they can. The current situation on the crisis is that President Lukashenko seems to have blinked after a phone conversation with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The tensions on the border seem to have eased, and Belarus is left with the task of dealing with the migrants itself. We'll have to wait and see what the final outcome will be. But it should be clearly understood that Belarus did not start this tit for tat retaliation. There is only one nation that is so vile and wild that it interferes in the affairs of almost all significant sized nations on earth, and that is Germany. It interfered in the affairs of Belarus by encouraging dissidents to harass President Lukashenko. In my video of May 24, 2021 titled Roman Protasevich is getting the Alexei Navalny and Jamal Khashoggi treatment and deserves it, I mentioned the following. Protasevich of Belarus is a German masquerader, meaning a person of German ancestry living in another country, engaged in harassing and troubling Alexander Lukashenko, just as Navalny has harassed, maligned, and defamed Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Jamal Khashoggi was engaged in maligning and smearing the Saudi royal family. The Saudis dealt with Khashoggi appropriately by luring him to their consulate in Turkey and hacking him to pieces. I am sure the Russians will deal with Navalny in their own way, and so will the Belarusians deal with Protasevich by putting an early end to his miserable life. If any nation's leaders will not do Germany's bidding by becoming their alliance partners, then the Germans will harass and trouble those leaders and plot to bring to power those opposition leaders who will join their global alliance. It is a no holds barred fight which includes slander, vilification, use of threats, violent protests, and even murder. They will never let any leader function in peace unless he or she is aligned with them, which means doing the Germans' bidding and opening his country's economy to rape by German businesses. Nahum the prophet prophesies this, as I'll soon show. They have German masqueraders in all white countries and alliance partners in other countries to carry out such activities incessantly. The only way to get rid of them is to exterminate them, that is, the German masqueraders. As long as they live, they will not let you live and work in peace if you are not part of their alliance, or they'll keep inventing ways to steal your wealth, impoverish you, and continue to heap as much pain, suffering, and anguish on you as they can. I think Belarus has taken the right steps in dealing with Protasevich. The Germans have spread their evil from nation to almost every nation on earth, as also shown by Nahum's prophecy. In whichever way President Lukashenko can retaliate against Germany through the European Union, it will not be enough to match the evil Germany has done to Belarus through the European Union. God describes the nature and activities of the Germans very succinctly in the Bible. First, he calls the German wild asses in Hosea 8 verse 9, which states, Assyria, a wild ass alone by himself. Yes, they are unique in how they deal with the world. That's why God calls them asses. Secondly, God calls them vile through Nahum the prophet in Nahum 1 verse 14. I will make your grave, for you are vile. Nahum also recorded the characteristics of the Germans in the end time in Nahum chapter 3 verse 1 and verse 4 and then 16 to 17. Woe to the bloody city! The prophet uses ancient Assyria's capital city Nineveh as a representation of the Germans. Woe to the bloody city! It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departs not. Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts that sells nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. Then verse 16 is from the New Living Translation version. Your merchants have multiplied until they outnumber the stars, but like a swarm of locusts, they strip the land and fly away, which is the reason I made my earlier statement that the Germans want the leader of the country allied with them to open his country's economy to rape by German businesses. Then in verse 17, you crowned as the locusts, and your captains as the great grasshoppers, which camp in the hedges in the cold day, but when the sun arises, they flee away, and their place is not known where they are. The Revised Standard Version translates it this way: your princes are like grasshoppers, your scribes like clouds or locusts settling on the fences in a cold day. When the sun rises, they fly away. No one knows where they are. Then upon verse 19, for upon whom has not your wickedness passed continually? Now, as Nahum the prophet says, the Germans shed blood everywhere or instigate others by making them their alliance partners to cause blood to be shed. They are full of lies and rob nations, and they are always victimizing someone as prey. A reference to witchcrafts mean that they are guided by Satan the devil. They have their businessmen operating in all major countries and stripping the land and wealth of the countries like locusts strip a land bare. A reference to grasshoppers and locusts says that they do their deeds so clandestinely that it is difficult to connect the evil to them. This is about grasshoppers. Nobody would have been able to connect to the Germans what Roman Protasevich was doing to Belarus from Lithuania. But their hand is in evil and violence in virtually every nation on earth. That's why God says, upon whom has not your wickedness passed continually? So, who is responsible for the migrant crisis on the Belarus-Poland border? It's not President Lukashenko, but the Germans who were interfering in the internal affairs of Belarus. They instigated the whole affair. They have German masqueraders in Belarus who are making life miserable for Lukashenko. So he acted to put them in jail, or some of them fled to Poland and Lithuania and started harassing him from there, as Protasevich was doing. Germany then retaliated through the European Union with sanctions. Lukashenko is using whatever leverage he has to retaliate against the European Union. I think he will continue using whatever leverage he has to the hilt, as the Germans will do their worst to continue to make life miserable for him and Belarus. Belarus should deal with the problem at the source, which is Germany's interference in its internal affairs. Part of the solution I recommend to every nation on earth is to exterminate German masqueraders in your midst, man, woman, and child. You will not have peace as long as there are some living among you. Then retaliate in full measure to make life miserable for the Germans as they are making life miserable for you. Yet, there is more to the story. The real hero of the story is President Lukashenko. The reason is that he is engaged in saving Belarus for the Belarusians. Before I tell that part of the story, let me begin by apologizing to President Lukashenko for portraying him in a bad light as just another dictator, or as the Germans like to call him, the last dictator in Europe. Based on the information I had in May 2021, This is what I said in my video of May 24, 2021. Granted that Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko is no saint and has ruled the country since 1994, but now I have different information. The population of German masqueraders in Belarus is quite large, and they are likely to win the presidency in free and fair elections. The prospect of a German masquerader becoming president of Belarus would have been disastrous for Belarusians of non German ancestry. During the time of the German masquerader leaders of Russia, Lenin and Stalin, between 600,000 to 1.4 million Belarusians lost their lives in the Soviet purges. If a German masquerader wins the presidency in Belarus, the real possibility of clandestinely murdering, impoverishing, and virtually enslaving Belarusians by them exists, and they will likely orchestrate incidents to provoke government intervention to massacre ethnic Belarusians, with a government which will be controlled by them, by the hundreds of thousands and even millions, with the ultimate goal of exterminating ethnic Belarusians. As evidence that they would do this, one just has to look at what they've done in the United States. That is what the German masqueraders have done. They've murdered 10 million white Americans of non German ancestry and have prevented 60 million births due to abortion, which likely would have had an impact of more than 100 million in American population. That's why President Lukashenko is a hero for Belarus. By holding on to power, he has prevented a disaster for ethnic Belarusians. Therefore, I apologize to President Lukashenko for portraying him as no saint and as just another dictator holding on to power at all costs. Ukraine dodged a potential tragedy when the masquerader Petro Poroshenko was president. That indicates that the masquerader population in Ukraine is not as large as their population in Belarus because they were able to elect an ethnic Ukrainian as president. Perhaps you can understand why Ursula von der Leyen and Angela Merkel have been frantically engaged in inveigling the European Union to impose round after round of sanctions on Belarus, and the United States and United Kingdom governments go along with them. No doubt that occurs because of the large number of German masqueraders in top positions in government in the United States and United Kingdom. The real possibility of German masqueraders in Belarus taking over the government exists. President Lukashenko has acted to prevent that from happening. That's what makes the Germans mad. They will use every trick in the book to try and take over government in Belarus. Ethnic Belarusians should prevent that from happening at all costs. Here is why Russians, Belarusians, Japanese, and other Eastern nations should not be afraid of the Germans. Bible prophecy indicates that finally the Germans and the European Union alliance partners will be brought down by an Eastern alliance. Russia, Belarus, and Japan will definitely be part of that Eastern alliance. Intervention by nations in the north and east, meaning northeast, is indicated in Daniel chapter 11 verse 44. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, that is the German dictator known as the King of the North and also known as the Beast. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to take away many. About 2.5 years after the King of the North's victory over the American, British, and Jewish alliance and enslavement of their population, he, that is the King of the North, will fight against an adversary known as the King of the South, which may be maybe a combination of Islamic and other nations, whom the King of the North will annihilate. Nothing in prophecy indicates a military victory of the Germans and the European Union over nations in the East. When the Eastern nations see him warring against the King of the South, the Eastern nations will see an opening and will start making preparations to fight the Germans and the European Union because they would have taken control of the world's economy. The ultimate result of this war will be the destruction of the Germans and the European Union. The prophecies describe this annihilation of the Germans this way. Daniel 11 verse 45 states, "And he, that is the king of the north, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain," meaning Jerusalem. "Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." God here prophesies that the king of the north, here prophesies the end of the king of the north. Nahum the prophet provides more graphic details. God prophesies what Russia, Japan, Belarus, and nations on the east allied with them are going to do to the Germans and the European Union nations allied with them. Almost the entire book is about how the Germans are going to be destroyed. The New Living Translation does a beautiful job of translating the book in vividly colorful graphic language. So I'm quoting virtually the entire short book of Nahum the prophet, beginning in chapter 1, verses 9 to 15, and the entire chapters 2nd and 3rd. This is all from the New Living Translation. "Why are you, Nineveh," meaning the Germans, "scheming against the Lord? He will destroy you with one blow. He won't need to strike twice. His enemies, tangled like thorn bushes and staggering like drunks, will be burned up like dry stubble in a field. Who is this wicked counselor of yours who plots evil against the Lord?" This is what the Lord says. "Though the Assyrians have many allies, they will be destroyed and disappear. O my people," meaning America, British Commonwealth nations, and the Jews, "I have punished you before, but I will not punish you again. Now I will break the yoke of bondage from your neck and tear off the chains of Assyrian oppression." And this is what the Lord says concerning the Assyrians and Nineveh. "You will have no more children to carry on your name. I will destroy all the idols in the temples of your gods. I am preparing a grave for you because you are despicable." Again, as quoted earlier, the King James Bible uses the word vile in place of despicable to describe the Germans. Continuing in verse 15, "Look, a messenger is coming over the mountains with good news. He is bringing a message of peace. Celebrate your festivals, O people of Judah," meaning the Jews, "and fulfill all your vows, for your wicked enemies will never invade your land again. They will be completely destroyed." Then in chapter 2, "Your enemy is coming to crush you, Nineveh. Man the ramparts, watch the roads, prepare your defenses, call out your forces. Even though the destroyer has destroyed Judah," meaning the Jews, "the Lord will restore its honor. Israel's," meaning the United States and British Commonwealth nations, "Israel's vine has been stripped off branches, but he, that is God, will restore its splendor. Shields flash red in the sunlight. See the scarlet uniforms of the valiant troops." This is talking about the Eastern Alliance's armies. "Watch as their glittering chariots move into position, with a forest of spears waving above them. The chariots race recklessly along the streets and rush wildly through the squares. They flash like firelight and move as swiftly as lightning. The king," meaning the German ruler, "shouts to his officers. They stumble in their haste, rushing to the walls to set up their defenses. The river gates have been torn open. The palace is about to collapse. Nineveh's exile has been decreed, and all the servant girls mourn its capture. They mourn like doves and beat their breasts in sorrow. Nineveh is like a leaking water reservoir. The people are slipping away. Stop, stop, someone shouts, but no one even looks back. Loot the silver, plunder the gold. There is no end to Nineveh's treasures, its vast uncounted wealth. Soon the city is plundered, empty, and ruined. Hearts melt and knees shake. The people stand aghast, their faces pale and trembling. Where now is that great Nineveh, that den filled with young lions? It was a place where people, like lions and their cubs, walked freely and without fear. The lion tore up meat for his cubs and strangled prey for his mate. He filled his den with prey, his caverns with his plunder. I am your enemy, says the Lord of heaven's armies. Your chariots will soon go up in smoke. Your young men will be killed in battle. Never again will you plunder conquered nations. The voices of your proud messengers will be heard no more. The chapter 3. What sorrow awaits Nineveh, the city of murder and lies? Again, the King James Version had it, woe to the bloody city, it is full of lies and robbery. Continuing, she is crammed with wealth and is never without victims. Hear the crack of whips, the rumble of wheels, horses' hooves pound, and chariots clatter wildly. See the flashing swords and glittering spears as the charioteers charge past. There are countless casualties, heaps of bodies, so many bodies that people stumble over them. All this because Nineveh, the beautiful, faithless city, mistress of deadly charms, enticed the nations with her beauty. She taught them all her magic, meaning teaching nations their evil satanic ways, enchanting people everywhere. I am your enemy, says the Lord of heaven's armies, and now I will lift your skirts and show all the earth your nakedness and shame. I will cover you with filth and show the world how vile you really are. Yes, God is commanding the nations of the earth to pour filth on the Germans and let them wallow in it as they pour filth on people, which they did in concentration camps, and also what the German masqueraders do clandestinely in the countries they live in. Continuing with verse 7. All who see you will shrink back and say, Nineveh lies in ruins. Where are the mourners? Does anyone regret your destruction? Are you any better than the city of Thebes, situated in the Nile River surrounded by water? She was protected by the river on all sides, walled in by water. Ethiopia and the land of Egypt gave unlimited assistance. The nations of Put and Libya were among her allies. Yet Thebes fell, and her people were led away as captives. Her babies were dashed to death against the stones of the streets. Soldiers threw dice to get Egyptian officers as servants. All their leaders were bound in chains. And you, Nineveh, will also stagger like a drunkard. You will hide for fear of the attacking enemy. All your fortresses will fall. They will be devoured like the ripe figs that fall into the mouths of those who shake the trees. Your troops will be as weak and helpless as women. The gates of your land will be opened wide to the enemy, and set on fire and burned. Verse 14. Get ready for the siege. Store up water. Strengthen the defenses. Go into the pits to trample clay and pack it into molds, making bricks to repair the walls. But the fire will devour you. The sword will cut you down. The enemy will consume you like locusts, devouring everything they see. There will be no escape, even if you multiply like swarming locusts. Your merchants are multiplied until they outnumber the stars. But like a swarm of locusts, they strip the land and fly away. Your guards and officials are also like swarming locusts that crowd together in the hedges on a cold day. But like locusts that fly away when the sun comes up, all of them will fly away and disappear. Your shepherds, meaning your leaders, are asleep, O Assyrian king. Your princes lie dead in the dust. Your people are scattered across the mountains with no one to gather them together, meaning they are dead with no one to bury them. There is no healing of your wound. Your injury is fatal. All who hear of your destruction will clap their hands for joy. Where can anyone be found who has not suffered from your continual cruelty? So, Belarus and Russia, hang tough and do not be afraid to confront this German menace if they provoke you in any way. Hit them back as hard as you can and begin by first exterminating all the masqueraders in your midst. You are on the right track in the way you are dealing with Protasevich. There is nothing in prophecy that indicates the Germans and the European Union will be able to defeat the nations of the East. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjeet Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the videos. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the facility to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that facility. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channels, which you can easily copy.